Hi there. Welcome to the recording of Learn How to Work Together Anywhere, the webinar, originally broadcast May 31st, 2018. I'm Elise Keith, founder of Lucid Meetings, and I was the host for this webinar, and I was joined by Lisette Sutherland. She's the author of Work Together Anywhere and the creator of the Work Together Anywhere workshop. Our presentation on the 31st consisted of a 25-minute presentation by Lisette, followed by Q&A from our live audience. Who was there in our live audience? Well, it was all kinds of people facing the question of how you make remote work successful from multiple perspectives. We had a good chunk of the audience were people who are leading remote teams, so managers and business owners trying to make remote work successful for them. We had another set of folks who were participants trying to move out into the remote work world and still be successful with their on-premise colleagues. We also had a group of people who were considering remote work, and they weren't reflected in this particular poll. And what kind of challenges were they facing? Well, we asked that question in a poll before the webinar, and the answers came in. It turns out that all of these things are problems that people regularly experience in remote work. Now, another common challenge that we have both when we're working remotely and when we're working with technology is that sometimes things don't go quite as planned. And in the case of this webinar, one of those things that didn't go quite as planned was my ability to start hitting the record button on time. So the introduction of the live webinar isn't part of this recording. We've caught you up here now, and we're going to join the recording about 1 minute into Lisette's presentation. Let's join Lisette.
All in video form, podcast form, transcripts are online, and some of them have been turned into sort of blog posts with the information condensed. So whatever form you like, it is available on the website, and that is what the book is created out of, is these hundreds of interviews with remote teams who are totally rocking it. Like I said before, I'm going to be mentioning a whole bunch of tools. If you'd like to see all the tools that are available for remote teams, tools that I recommend and people send to me, here's the website. It's /remote or /tools. It all goes to the same place. So definitely check out this tools list. It's a fantastic list. Thanks to everybody who's been sending me tools. I'm a big tool junkie, so I just love learning about all the new tools. So I'm going to start by, and the book starts by, setting the scene. What does the remote working landscape look like? And I'm really going to just breeze through. It's going to be, so get your note-taking stuff ready. I'm going to just bombard you guys with tips and stuff. But I want to set the scene in terms of why are people and why are companies going remote, because they're for very different reasons. But the overarching reason that everybody's going remote is because they can. The technology is now getting so good that we are able to replicate what it's like to work online or work in the office online. And I want to show you some of those methods today. But the number one reason that people are really going remote, and it's an easy reason, I think everybody's going to have the same answer, which is freedom. Now, freedom takes different forms. It looks different for different people. But the number one thing that I heard on my interviews was freedom from the commute. This is a picture taken in the commuting in Japan. But every time I visit London, it's the same scene. And I always wonder, how do people do this every day? And one of the best quotes that I heard in the interview is, a bad commute can ruin a great job. So people, by and large, prefer not to work 100% of the time remote, but prefer to work a hybrid schedule of some days in the office, some days at home or somewhere else, and most of them want the flexibility to be able to choose when they come into work. And one of the first polls that I'd like to do is I want to ask the participants, how far are you commuting every day? And we actually have a poll. Oh, there we go. How far do you commute every day? So let's just get a sense of what people say. And Elise, I'm not sure, do I need to stop sharing my screen for you to show the results? I think that is the case.
I have no idea. Why don't we find out?
Yeah.
All right, we've got about, let's see, 70% of everybody's voted. We'll give it another second. All right, let's see what folks say. Okay, share results. Can everybody see that? It looks like
Oh, great.
most of us commute less than 30 minutes.
Wow, great. So for you,
Winners!
yeah, for you guys, the commuting is not going to be such an issue, but there are some people I saw that commute more than 2 hours a day, and I bet you'd probably rather be doing almost anything than commuting. So that's really one of the biggest reasons, is just having a little bit of flexibility in your schedule. But by and large, I think the number one reason, Remote Co. And FlexJobs put out surveys, and one of the number one reasons is for productivity. And Teo Heron is somebody that I interviewed a couple years back. He's a creativity expert located in Sweden, and he wrote a book about working where you're most productive. And the interview was fascinating. People want to work. People don't all work productively in the office. They want to be able to work in different places. This is a picture of my home office. This is where I am right now. I've got an electric sit-stand desk, which I love. I've got multiple monitors, great speakers, a lighting system for when I'm working with clients when it's dark on my side of the world and light on somebody else's side of the world. So I've got this is the place where I'm most productive, in my beautiful garden outside that you can see. Now, for companies, it's a totally different reason. Companies are usually less excited about allowing their employees to go remote because they think they're going to slack off. And actually, that is not the case. Data shows otherwise, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But in general, flexibility is one of the main benefits that employees ask for, and therefore flexibility is one of the main things that companies can offer employees for retention purposes. It also, motivation, of course, innovation. When you have happier employees, all of these things go through the roof. All the studies show that. And flexibility is one of the number one reasons for happier workers, one of the top benefits requested. And then, of course, I didn't really have a picture for this, but cost and necessity. Sometimes we just can't find the people that we need locally, and we have to go remote. I think that's the case for many, many people, is that they just simply have to be remote. And in that case, then what? And that's what I'm here for now, to tell you then what. So I'm really breezing through, but I want to keep this short so we can open up to Q&A. But I want to first talk about individuals when they're working remotely, and then I'll talk about managers and teams. So part one of the book is just setting the scene, all the statistics and why and the reasons, and showing you who people are and what remote workers look like. Part two of the book focuses on individuals who are working remotely and what they need in order to be successful. Now, if you're just starting out, if you've never worked remotely before, I have a questionnaire online that will help you prepare yourself for, are you ready to work remotely? And you can find that at this URL here. It's a great questionnaire in terms of all the skills and things that you need, and you can take yourself through that. But one of the most important things when we're going to be working remotely, I think the most important thing is to have an awesome internet connection. So I always tell people, listen, if there's anything that you can invest in as a remote worker, it's a high bandwidth connection. It's super important, and it's important. We'll be talking about why, but because we want to use video and we want to be able to use the tools, and we need to be able to communicate with each other as if we were side by side. I want to be able to just push a button and talk to somebody. And in order to do that, we need to have a great internet connection. So this is the next poll question, which is, I'd like you to rate your internet connection where you are now. 10 means it's awesome. Your children can be playing video games, your spouse is on a video conference call, and you can download Netflix and no problems at all. That's a 10. Number 1 is you're still hearing the dial-up modem sounds from the 80s. If you're using it. So let's give people a second to rate your internet connection on a scale of 1 to 10, just see where we're at. It also depends on where we are in the world.
All right. And it looks like we've got some votes in. All right. And
great, lots of awesome internet connections. Great.
I want to go live where the people with the awesome internet connections are, because we certainly don't have universally awesome options here. So very cool.
Right. If you're in the Nordics, those are probably all the Nordic people. That's awesome internet in the Nordics. So but yeah, it is really important. If there's one thing you can invest in, it's a high bandwidth connection. That will make your life easier in many respects. The other is to pay attention to sound quality. I recommend people putting themselves on mute when they're not speaking, or get yourself a noise canceling headset. I mean, even a very basic one. They're not that expensive anymore. You can get a good headset for €50 or $60, depending on the exchange rate. But you know, that barking dog or the chirping bird or the coffee shop sounds, they're cute at first. But it quickly gets in the way of a productive conversation. So minimizing the noise, because we want to create, not only do we want to have a high bandwidth connection online, we want to create a high bandwidth communication structure when we're talking to other people, and good sound quality is primary importance. The next is using video. If there's one way to create camaraderie on a team or to get to know people in a more personal way, turning on the video is really important. And when people say there's unengaged participants in meetings, well, turn on the video, because then you can see who's engaged and who's not engaged. And it's much more fun. Just like I showed you when I turned the chroma cam off, you could see that the engagement drops. So for your online meetings, definitely turn the videos on. A lot of people don't like using them, but I'm here to just say, get over it. Video is the way of the future. It's critically important for remote teams, not applicable in every situation, of course, but certainly in terms of team building and camaraderie and engagement, you'll go a long way. There are many video tools on the market. My very favorite is Zoom.us, followed very closely by BlueJeans, and there's a number of them on the tools list. But there's one that I don't like in particular. Oh, and we'll get to that in a second, and I'll go into that. So I'd like to know from the audience, how often do you use video on your teams? Let's just see what kind of video users we have today. So this is more of a getting to know your audience part of the session too.
Yeah, at Lucid, we have an online software platform. I mean, that's partly what we do. And we still pair it with Zoom to get that interaction going. All right.
Yeah.
So let's see how everybody else is feeling about video.
Yeah. Oh, we get some always, some rarely. Well, I hope to convince you of its importance during the webinar today. I'll show you some tools that make it highly important. You know, a lot of us want to be in our yoga clothes and don't feel, you know, are having bad hair days, but hey, the headset covers up bad hair, and just putting on a shirt is pretty easy. You can wear your yoga pants underneath. So I say turn your videos on and get used to it. I never force people, I just do it myself, and other people see how effective it is, and then they follow. The other thing to note when you are just starting out, or if you're a remote worker, is it takes time to figure out your proper setup. So if you're just starting out, it really does take time. Now this picture series I'll show you. So this is from Jesse Fuel. He's an Agile coach in the United States, and he started his office in the attic. So he had built his office in the attic. This picture is not his actual attic, Jesse, in case you're watching. But I wanted to show, because Jesse is a tall guy, and it started to just feel cramped. So then what he did is he moved his office to his bedroom. So now this is just in a corner of the bedroom. But then he realized that he wasn't leaving the room like the whole day and night. He was always there. So that wasn't working for him. So then what he did is he built this here, and this is called a shed quarter. It's like a little shed in his backyard, and this is his son testing out the inside of the shed quarter. But you can see it's pretty handy. And this is what ended up working for him. So the thing to know about remote working and getting it set up, whether you're a team or an individual, is it's a process, and it's an iterative process. And you just have to be patient with learning what your preferences are and what other people's preferences are, and building that. So that was Jesse Fuel's story. Okay. And while managers are always afraid that people are going to be slacking, the data shows otherwise. And in fact, the real problem with remote workers is burnout, because we can work at any time from anywhere, and we tend to just go, 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 go. And so taking time off, putting our boundaries in place for ourselves is very important, which is why it takes some time to get to know your own rhythms and to put those boundaries in place for ourselves. Most people recommend separating work from life when you're at home, so have a separate place that you go just for work so that it doesn't bleed too much into your home life, and I would say that that's definitely good advice. And loneliness is a huge factor for when people are working remotely. So I'm going to show you some tools for combating loneliness in a second, but it's definitely, going to coffee shops, going out into public places, using video to work online with your colleagues in collaborative sessions. Those are all ways that we can stay social while working remotely. And of course, if you really want to take a deep dive, you can get the book or listen to this podcast episode. All the podcasts, by the way, have been turned into blog posts. So if you're not a podcast listener, you can just go and read all the information there. But the critical part of remote teams is trust. And as an individual, we can build trust on a team by being reliable. So we do what we say we're going to do. We can be consistent, which is providing consistently high quality work over and over again. And we can be responsive. People can find you when they need to. That's very, very important, because we tend to, when we can't see each other, we tend to make assumptions, and we never tend to assume good things. It's always like, oh, I haven't seen Joe all day. I bet he's slacking. It's never, oh, I haven't seen Joe all day. I bet he's working really hard and it must be really important. So we tend to assume negative, which is why it's important to be visible and responsive to our remote colleagues. I'm really blazing through. This book is 400 pages, so you can imagine all the tips that are in there. I'm really blazing through, but I want to get to the management part and some of the tools part. Section 3 of the book really focuses on transitioning. If you're a company that's going from co-located to remote, this section focuses on how to transition from co-located to remote and how to hire remote workers. The biggest advice that I have for transitioning is go slow. And I just see a quick question there. Where can you get the podcast? They're all on the website, collaborationsuperpowers.com. You can find links to everything there. So for transitioning, go slow. Try baby steps. For example, instead of going and working from home all the time, just do one day a week. Try an afternoon a week. Have everybody call in from a separate office just to get the hang of it. And I say it's worth it because I feel that the processes and things that you need to put in place in order to make remote working successful are the same things that you're going to want at your company anyway. So even if you decide to not go remote in the end, the work that you'll have done to get there, to make that decision, will only make your company stronger in the end. You'll be putting the processes in place, communication tools, and having these conversations with people. And one of the main benefits that happens is that your company can become what I call remote first, which means no matter whether you work remote or not, you have those processes in place to be able to, in case there's bad weather, a bad commute, you have sick children at home, or the plumber's coming sometime between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. and you have to be at home. If any of these situations happen, work does not have to stop if you're a remote first company, and that is really, really important. In terms of hiring, I've got some very detailed tips on the website and in the book about hiring remote workers. The number one, across all the interviews, the number one tip was do not hire mediocre people. Especially on, you never want to do it on any team, but especially on a remote team, you do not want to hire mediocre people. You want to hire only the best. And that just came up over and over and over again because it's just so painful when you have an underperformer. Now, in terms of interviewing and finding people, the sort of across the board, people said use a variety of mediums during your interview process. So don't just use video, also use instant messaging because a lot of your information is going to be written. You can use email, you can do a phone interview, have a variety of mediums that you test people's skills on. Okay, again, blowing through things here because I've already been talking for almost 20 minutes, I think. So let's get to quickly management and managing remote workers. Now, you've seen this slide before, because as individuals, we build trust on a team by being reliable, consistent, and responsive. But as managers of a remote team, we have to come to this team with the trust that people are going to do their work and trust that remote working is possible. I have hundreds of interviews that show teams who are rocking the remote world, so you can trust that it is possible to work effectively remote. So come at it with that mindset. That's different than, oh, let's give this thing a try. I'm not sure if it's going to work. Know that it is possible and then set your teams up for success. Now, the number one thing I said before, we want to have good internet connection because we want it to be easy to talk to each other. But for managers, one of the ways you can set your team up for success is by making communicating easy. And I mean like Star Trek easy, where you've got the communicator in your chest and you're saying, hey, Picard to Riker, and Riker responds from wherever he is on the ship. So that is what I mean by making communicating easy. And it is possible now with the technology. One of the things that we can do is use good equipment. So that old spider phone, where, hey, Jerry, it's Lisette, can you hear me? Like where you have to lean over and see if they hear you. That is something of the past. And my least favorite tool in the world out there is Skype for Business. I think it's just it has just got the worst quality. It's the hardest to use. The user interface is not intuitive. And most people that I talk to in companies do not like it, which brings us to our next poll. And I'd like to say, what is your experience with Skype for Business? Do you love it? Is it just okay? Do you actively hate it, or do you just not even use it at all? Let's see what's out there. I'm expecting a call from Skype for Business at some point because I keep bashing them in every presentation, but there's so many better tools out there. Very curious. Hopefully we don't have a lot of Skype for Business lovers on this call. But we'll see.
If you have somebody on here who truly loves it, and I can tell you now that we have most of the votes in here right now that you do.
I'm sure there are some lovers.
They get to make the case. So that one person who really loves Skype for Business, go ahead and let us know why. Yep, absolutely. And it looks like actually most of us are blessed to have other options.
Yes, yeah, thanks, Tal. If you're using Skype for Business and in your department, push back on your IT department. If you're a hater, I really think if you want to work remotely productively, do not bind your employees' hands with bad equipment. Get good equipment. Now, you don't have to throw it in a river. I do recommend a more ecological form of throwing Skype for Business out, but get really good tools. It's important if you want to collaborate online. Now, I've gone on and on about video. Again, video is really important. You can see how easy it is. You can see everybody on the call. Zoom makes it super easy. Blue Jeans makes it easy. There's a number of other tools. But there's also things if you're a hybrid team that are really great. Meeting Owl is a new video conferencing tool that's out there. It's got a 360-degree microphone and video. So it just focuses on the person who's speaking. Great tool, and you can get as fancy as you want. This is a system called Info Presence, and as you can see, it really simulates what it's like to sit across the table from somebody else. So it is starting to get really, really sophisticated, but video is increasingly important. Now, I want to introduce people to telepresence. If you've heard any of my previous presentations before, you've probably seen this, and that is this is one form of telepresence. This is the Kubi that you see on the screen. And what it allows you to do is beam in, just like Skype, but now you can move yourself from side to side, or you can nod your head up and down or say hello. So what this allows you to do is, if you're the only remote participant in an in-person meeting, you can now see who's sitting next to you and feel actually where the sound is coming from. You actually do get a sense from what direction things are coming from. You can also focus on the whiteboard. And that movement gives you a feeling of presence in the room. So for those people who are in the room, in the flesh, you being able to move actually humanizes you a bit more. So again, we're just creating human presence in a digital form. We can go one step further, and there are the drivable robots. This is the Suitable Technologies Beam Pro. And in their office, they have 50% of the people who are in the flesh and 50% of their employees who beam in via robot, or it's a 40-60 split about. But it works, as you can see. So half their workforce is beaming in through the robot, and they have a very high-functioning team. So it is possible. Now I'm going to take one step further out. Most people are not ready for virtual reality yet. We are still struggling with things like spider phones and Skype for Business, but virtual reality is coming. This is Roomy. It's made by a company called Doghead Simulations. They put on their virtual reality glasses. They meet in a virtual office. They stand around a virtual whiteboard and discuss things. They can do their tasks and drawings when they're in the virtual office, and this is the future. but it's just not the future in the next couple of years. I mean, it's possible now, but most people are still struggling with the basics. But I would be remiss not to mention virtual reality because it is going to be the next big thing. And that spider phone looks pretty silly compared to the technology that we have today. So I won't go too on and on about it, but I've only shown you like 1% of what's available out there. But just know a lot has happened in the last 5 years, and it is time to take another look at the technology that's available that allows us to work across borders. Again, here's the link to the tools, and I'm going to speed through the rest because I realize I've got a lot of information here. After we make communication easy, the next best thing to do on a team is define what normal behavior is for your team. A lot of people complained about work stalling out, and this is one of the ways that we do this is by creating a team agreement for our team. And this just outlines what is the information that we need to share. How are we going to communicate with each other? What are expected response times? Are there core hours? How do we know what each other are doing? All of these things, when you put them together in a team agreement, you get rid of all the basic misunderstandings that you have on your team. And I can go into that. I go into that in quite a bit of detail in the book. I interviewed Beat Buhlmann from Evernote recently, and their team, they create etiquettes around meeting etiquette. They have email etiquette, calendar etiquette. They even had a home office etiquette, tasks, and Slack etiquette. And that's what your team agreements are all about, is what are the etiquettes? Are you going to mute yourself when you're not speaking? Are you going to raise your hand when you want to talk? All of these things can be defined for the team. Aha, somebody just asked in the Q&A. Yes, there is a sample team agreement on the website. There is a template that you can use. There are instructions for facilitators for how to facilitate a remote team agreement meeting. Lots and lots of resources. Just go to collaborationsuperpowers.com/extras. It's all there, downloadable for free. So. And then the last component of managing a successful remote team is to know what each other are doing. And I call it working out loud. I stole it from John Stepper, who wrote a book called Working Out Loud. Highly recommend the book. And what it means is just make your work or yourself observable to your colleagues. And many people do that with Slack or instant messaging systems. So you can just typing all day, letting people know what you're doing. There's other tools like I Done This, which is a Facebook-style news feed that allows you to just type what you've gotten done that day. But my favorite form of working out loud is using a virtual office. So let me introduce you to Sakoko. After Zoom, this is my favorite tool. After Zoom and telepresence, my favorite tool. Sakoko is a virtual office. You're looking down into the office. Each one of these places here is a separate room, and each one of these avatars is somebody in the room. Now, you can only see and hear the people that are in the same room with you. But as you can see, I can see where everybody else is on the virtual floor plan. So now if I am Cab here and I want to go talk to Marilyn, I just double click on Marilyn's office and I'm there in her office with my microphone and video, and I can talk to Marilyn like this. If anybody's interested in trying this out, I run a virtual co-working group where we just co-work together and sometimes hang out, sometimes work. You're welcome to join. Just go to virtualteamtalk.com. And then the last part about managing a successful remote team, not second to the last part, is setting up regular feedback loops. The annual performance review is not going to cut it anymore. We need something that's on a more continuous basis because we can't see each other. Jürgen Appelo has come up with a fabulous system called Merit Money, which is a 360-degree team feedback system. If you just Google Jürgen Appelo Merit Money, you'll find out more information there. One-on-ones, retrospectives, all of those things are critically important on the team because small things turn into very big things when they don't get talked about. So we need to set up times and places for these things to be talked about. Okay, so my Personify freezes in these terrible positions. And then the last part about managing remote teams is showing appreciation. It's really part of feedback. And we need to remember to celebrate small milestones together and to just stop and recognize what accomplishments we have. One of my favorite things to do is, I'll wait till the thing starts up, is virtual pie. So as you can see here, when I'm done, I had a workshop today and a presentation today, and when I'm done, I've got my virtual pie right here, and I'm going to celebrate for having done a good workshop and hopefully a useful presentation for you. Okay, That is I took way longer than I should have, sorry about that, but it is a breeze through the structure of the book. And in this extra section, what I have is all kinds of questionnaires and checklists and how to convince your boss if you want to go remote, tips for online meeting facilitation, the remote team agreement templates. All of that is available at the website in the extra section. Feel free to download and share with everybody that you know. That's it for me. I want to also leave people with a gift. One of the things that I have developed are collaboration supercards, which are virtual team meeting cards. It's difficult to sometimes interrupt somebody verbally or to, to tell them something. So I have these cards that just let people know, like, hey, I can't hear you. So that's just a way. When we use video, you can use all kinds of great pieces, just paper and pens and cards, and you have the visual aspect. That's why it's so important. So feel free to download. I put together a supercard sampler. You can download the most popular supercards for free and just wow your remote team when you go back to work with your virtual prowess.
Awesome. And we will definitely make sure everybody gets a chance to have those links after the webinar. That'll be part of the follow-up email, the recording, and then one other extra thing, which we will talk about at the very end. But right now, let's get into questions. So we have a couple of questions that have come in on the Q&A. If you have others, go ahead and send them in, and we'll take a look at those now. I have some questions of my own because remote work is clearly something that we do. I am in my home office today, dressed nicely from the waist up, as every good remote worker knows how to do. And Lisette, let's start with some of the more nitty-gritty questions. One of our attendees asked today about tools. How well do the whiteboards work in the different tools, and what do you recommend for those kinds of features?
So one thing I'll say is virtual whiteboards have gotten a lot better in the last couple of years, and there's a whole bunch of them. I have a special section on the tools page of my website for virtual whiteboards, and my recommendation is just try some and see what works for your team. Like I could say, oh, real-time boards is my favorite, but it depends on the team and it depends on what people use them for. But it's super important to visualize what you're talking about with your remote team. So anytime you can do that with paper and pen, with whiteboards, anytime you can visualize something, it's always better. So I just try them and see what works.
Well, and on that front, I think there are the whiteboard tools that are built into things like Zoom and Skype for Business and whatnot. And then there are a whole separate set of tools, like Real-Time Board is a whole separate product. So if you're one of those companies that does some really in-depth collaborative work, you're going to want to move beyond just the whiteboard that's in Zoom. I would say. Would that be your recommendation as well?
For sure. But it's not just about the tool. In fact, it's totally not about the tools. It's more about the tools just allow you to do the work, but it's more about the mindset and the ability to collaborate and working together. So I know I talk a lot about tools, but it's more the mindset of people.
Yeah. So there's so one more tech question, and then we'll get into some of the meaty questions. What is your favorite pair of headsets?
This is the Logitech H600. I find it very comfortable. It's USB, it's wireless, and I can go 20 meters or 30 feet and still hear. So that's nice. If I just need to go grab something at the door and come back, I can still hear what people. So Logitech makes great ones, and they're not that expensive. It was like 50 euros.
Awesome. One other tool, and this is a bridge question that gets us from tools into behavior. Somebody says that with video, Dan says that leading by example is important, but some people just seem to say that it makes them uncomfortable. How do you help people overcome that fear?
Zoom, so it does make a lot of people uncomfortable for a variety of reasons. One of those reasons is that they don't like seeing themselves on video, and fair enough, that happens a lot. Zoom has the ability so that you can hide yourself, so that you're not seeing yourself, you're just seeing other people, and other people can see you. I never force people to use video, but I turn mine on. The extroverts in the group will automatically turn theirs on because they like it. And some people may never turn theirs on, but usually I'll say, like, just turn it on for the first 5 minutes so we can say hello to each other and just look at each other eye to eye, and then you can turn it off if you want. And at the end, we turn it on to say goodbye. So I just baby steps in trying to get people to use it. But yeah, it's not for everybody, but it is so important for camaraderie. I mean, when you lose a sense, we already can't smell, maybe that's a feature, but if you lose sight, that's a huge thing, that's a huge part of our senses that we lose when we're working, and if we can have that, then it's just better.
So one of the things you had mentioned during your presentation was that companies that and people who are moving to going remote should start slow. What does that mean? What does slow mean? Where do you start first?
Well, one is I would get the team together and ask what it is that they need and what they're looking for, because you might be surprised. A lot of people, in fact, a lot of people don't like working from home. They prefer to work at the office. So in that case, you want to give them that. But what I mean by start slow is one company that I heard about, they said, okay, we want to try this remote working thing. Everybody, for the next 2 weeks, go wherever you want and let's try remote working. And of course, people went like all over the world. They took, it wasn't like the next day that they tried the day. But people went all over the world, and they did not anticipate bad internet connections, time zone problems, tool problems, like not being able to work the tools. It was a disaster, and sadly, the company decided not to allow flexibility because of that experiment. So that to me was way too big of a step. They should have perhaps tried each person calling in from their desk and see what happens. Like, do you have a quiet office where you can do that? What's the internet connection like? What bugs do you run into? That's what I mean by baby steps. Just one thing at a time. Try something in a small step so that the explosion isn't too big, and then evaluate and iterate.
Great. So on that front, in terms of starting out, Jan asked that she says she's a manager who's starting work part-time and often from home next week. What's the most important thing she can do to remain visible to the rest of her management team?
Over communicate. Call people, send emails, send updates, turn your video on, have video calls. I would just be in touch to the point where you think you're going to be annoying, and let them tell you that you're annoying. First, create a team agreement to see what people's preferences are. But really, you can almost not communicate too much. But I think one of the biggest things is out of sight, out of mind. So just don't be out of sight.
Yeah. And that team agreement, I know you talked about that earlier. That was actually how we met Lisette, because Lisette put together a team agreement template that you can find in the Lucid Meetings template gallery as well. And we have a blog post on our website, and maybe Tricia will put in the link, of what that was like to run through for our team. Because while we do have a physical office in Portland, we don't always go there. And we have remote employees around the world. So that remote work agreement is a huge and wonderful place to start. Speaking of communication and over communication, Diana asks, how do you define the best? You said earlier, hire the best for remote work. That's clearly not just about technical skills.
No, for sure not. You need to have somebody who has worked remotely before. I mean, you can try to teach somebody to work remotely, but I think they should get that experience. There's plenty of ways of getting remote experience. You can volunteer for all kinds of things. But it's a combination of skill set, skill set, mindset, and tool set. So you need to have somebody, one person I hired, for example, started talking about how lonely that they were working by themselves at home, and I was hiring for a remote job, and he just couldn't handle the loneliness. I mean, that's one thing. If you have somebody who can't handle the loneliness and they need to work remote, that's probably not the person that you want to hire, or they need to figure out a solution for that themselves. So, or when you're hiring and you're thinking, what I mean by the best is, there's sometimes you're interviewing people and you think, I'm not sure. Don't hire them. If you're not sure, it's a no. Or, you have to, it's like Derek Sivers always says, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. And I would say that that's the same good advice for remote workers. If it's not a hell yes, don't hire them.
Awesome. So on that front, Kira had asked how you support workers who crave in-person interactions and aren't ready to go remote. So in the case where you're talking about hiring somebody new for a remote position, you get to make that gut check, right? You know, hell no. But what about when you've got a team that you're trying to transition? Are there tips for that?
Okay, and you're transitioning, and then what's the question? Sorry,
How
I
do you
forgot.
support workers who crave in-person interactions and aren't ready to go remote?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the virtual office is what comes to mind first, is because you get so much interaction in a virtual office. Perhaps also if they need, there's so many places to work from. They don't have to work alone at home. You could work from a co-working space. You could, my husband hates working from home. He actually rented an office at with his client so that he's there with his client, and he just works from the office there. He just hated working at home. So I'd say get creative with the solutions. It's not one all or nothing. But we have to take care of our own social needs. I, for instance, like to be really isolated when I work. I have a colleague who loves to be in the hub and bub of things, and so she has to go to co-working spaces, and I work here alone. It's not really the answer to the question, but there's so many options of places to work. It's not just one or the other.
So is that the sort of same advice you'd give? James asks, what if the members of your team are tenured and hesitant to engage with technology? Similar,
NASA,
but different.
Yeah, NASA, when I interviewed NASA, what they said, their technical support team, every time they have a new scientist who comes on board, they give one-on-one support to help people learn the tools. Because, of course, these are scientists, and their skill is the science. Their skill is not learning how to use all these tools. So one is, as a team, you need to agree on which tools that you're going to use. And as a team, you need to help each other out. Phil Montero, a lot of people in interviews, Phil Montero in particular, said it's good to also have sandbox time with your tools that's not necessarily work related, so that people can push buttons in a playful way that's not so serious. But I really think one-on-one support, support from the team, and just helping people, because people are embarrassed when they don't know how to use the tools. Especially if you have virtual virtuosos on your team and they're just like, they're just off and running. People are embarrassed, and you don't want that. You want to, I think one-on-one support is probably the best thing to do to just help guide and making decisions as a team.
That safety aspect is a huge thing. How do you make it safe, right? There's and Tricia, maybe you can find this link. There is a group in Sweden that decided to make the government areas go more remote so that they could save carbon. They were doing carbon offset. But all of their managers were longtime tenured managers who had learned how to run teams in person. They knew how to run a meeting with a whiteboard. They knew how to run a meeting when they could look somebody in the eye, but they had no idea how to use the technology. So they were still traveling for all their meetings. And what they did is they did exactly what you said. They mentored. They took a tech person and they put that with a senior manager, and they were their tech shadow buddy. And that made the difference. They were able to move through that transition. All right, next question. Lisette, Jose asks, do you recommend having always on video while in work mode?
Interesting, because I've tried this. I've tried this in a number of different ways. With the virtual co-working group, I've done a number of experiments. I personally don't like having the video on if I'm just working and I'm doing virtual co-working. The video, I find it very distracting because it's movement, and I'm constantly seeing movement out of the corner of my eye. So another option is turning the videos off and keeping the sound on. So you can kind of hear that there's activity, or you can hear people typing, but it's not distracting enough to see it. You can, of course, have video off and sound off, and then just turn it on, unmute yourself when you need something. But this is an instance where Sukoko is brilliant, because just being able to see people's avatars gives you the feeling of presence and the feeling that people are around you, but there's not a lot of movement on the screen. So that's a good solution for that. I think it's a matter of experimentations. Some teams really like having the video on. In fact, there's a number of teams that have webcams, like 2 teams in 2 different offices, and they have webcams set up in the office, so you can't hear anybody, but you simply see the webcam on the office, so you can see if people are at their desks and what they're doing. And it sounds a bit Big Brother at first, but over time, the teams actually really learn to like it a lot. And what I found so amusing is they've developed their own sign language. So like they say hello in the morning with like a one particular wave, and then there's a going to lunch wave and a goodbye symbol that they've given to each other. So they're doing team building and camaraderie just using the webcam. So it depends on the people. I'd say experiment, see what works.
That's a totally fun tip about the personalized sign language. It's a way to not only communicate, but also to create an in, right? To create a sense of team and belonging and whatnot. Once you know the hand signal for lunch, you are definitely in the group, right?
Right.
Yeah, fun. Donna asks, she says she's the only remote employee of her firm, and she has a hard time getting other employees in the office to try remote communication tools. They always ask that she travels 90 miles to the office to meet with them face to face. Any tips on things she can say or do that will help change that behavior?
It's really difficult behavior. And one of the things I always say is you have to look at it from the perspective of what's in it for them. So definitely there's a lot in it for you because you don't want to travel the 90 minutes to get to the office for a silly meeting that you could have over Zoom. But what's in it for them? So that also, if you're trying to convince your manager to go remote, that's the number one thing to do is what's in it for them? How is it going to make their lives better? Because at the moment it's status quo. They have nothing to lose. So looking at a perspective of what's in it for them, and surely there must be something, flexibility, something. And then what I would also say is find somebody who's enthusiastic and have them be your champion. There must be one person at the office that you can connect with, and maybe you can do a video call with them and they can show other people, or that they can be the liaison for you to that office. Try a Kubi, for example, and show them how, put the Kubi at the receptionist desk or wherever. I'm not, it depends on the layout of your office, but be present somehow and sort of just experiment and force it. But finding a champion at the audience and figuring out what's in it for them, that'll go a long way.
Which is very similar to the question that Douglas asked. He said, if he has the opportunity to talk to the CEO of a company with no remote work culture, how can he convince them to give it a shot by working remotely with me?
Check out the extras page. Check out the extras page because I have a how to convince your boss template questionnaire. So that will certainly be helpful.
I know certainly in our experience with that same kind of situation, it's always an ROI discussion. Very much what's in it for me, but at a very top level business line kind of perspective. And we have one European client we worked with who recently found a way to save the company 3 million euros a year by changing how they were doing remote meetings.
Yeah, money is a big incentive.
Money matters. Money matters. All right. Rachel asks, she says, culturally, remote working is not considered normal. They're an office-based organization where about 20% of the people have requested it as a way of working. They've got it. So now they've got a divide in the company where the parents of young children most likely are the remote workers, and the younger staff and older managers are in the office 9 to 5. How can we encourage the senior management, the remote working, and investing in the tools to go with it is a good move for everyone, not something we just have to let people do because when they invoke their flexible working rights?
Yeah, it's to me, the incentive is being a remote first culture, is not having the work slow down when something happens. And I think that makes your business so much less vulnerable when no matter what happens, you're able to continue with the work. So regardless of whether they allow flexible working, it's good to have the processes and systems in place to be able to do it. Everybody has to stay home for one reason or another. I mean, maybe you're slightly sick, but you still go into the office because you don't want to use up your sick day. But that's a perfect way of working remotely. You can take a nap when you need to, you can eat your chicken soup, and you can still get your work done. And Yeah, going remote first, I think I have a big section in the book on going remote first and why and how, and I think that's probably a great convincer of teams.
Yeah, wonderful. We have a couple more questions, and we're getting close to the end of our time, so we're going to go ahead and run through those. So Kathleen says she's working with teams who are trying to roll out agile methodologies remotely. Oh, Kathleen, you will have to meet Diana. I think Diana is also in the chat there. And since part of what makes agile working so well is the shared collaboration that goes on in person and with environments that have current projects and product development being displayed up on walls and in the environment, how can you replicate that so everyone in the organization can see what's going on visually? And how do you encourage folks to share their coding remotely?
Yeah,
I mean, you've got a lot of agile teams that you work with.
Oh, tons. Most of my audience is agile because agile teams are, one, tech savvy and interested in continuous improvement, and they have to work remotely. So it's a perfect storm for working remotely. And a lot of people say, oh, agile and remote can't go hand in hand. And I think agile shows us how to be remote. We have people over processes. We have lots of retrospectives, feedback loops in place, and I think it's the perfect template. So, and now I've forgotten the question.
How do you replicate some of the awesomeness of like the giant walls in Agile when you've got a remote team? And how do you do things like pair programming?
I mean, pair programming is perfect for remote. In fact, so many programmers that I know prefer to do it online versus huddled around a laptop for a variety of reasons. Way more comfortable. You get to be in your own home. Yeah, ergonomics. Yeah. So pair programming, I never understand. I mean, yeah, okay, it's great if if you're really close to the other person, but like I'd much rather be at my laptop and have somebody else be at theirs and sharing screens. The only way I really know how to replicate rooms of whiteboards and stuff and sticky notes is in Sococo, because when you go into Sococo room, you can have up on the wall a task board just virtually there. It's a permanent thing. So you can permanently, so when people walk into the room, they see that there's a whiteboard there, they click on it, and they can see what's on the whiteboard. Mm-hmm. Other than that, it's a matter of using tools, and then it's a matter of creating your team agreement so that everybody knows exactly what tools you're going to use. And that has to be very clear and explicit about which tools you're going to use. So yes, it's harder, but a little bit of creativity goes a long way.
I think iObea is a tool that a team that's used to a big wall should definitely check out. They're the lean management companies. They were actually focused originally on car manufacturers, so they're used to very big scale things, and it works really, really quite well. Okay, we have time for just one more question. Diana asks that it seems to me that time zone differences are a huge challenge. Do you have any tips for dealing with remote work across distant time zones?
Yes, many. I just put it in the chat, actually. Sadly, we can't squeeze the world physically together. There's nothing we can do. Like Australia is always going to be far away from the Netherlands. There's not much we can do. The tips that I've gotten from the interviews are organize your teams well. Be very deliberate about what work goes where. If you have time zones that are really far apart, you want to be able to have the teams need to be able to work separately so that they're not dependent on each other. Use follow the sun. Organize from north to south instead of east to west so that you can still have large distances but be in the same time zone. Share the pain. Mm-hmm. So one person should not always be the same person that's getting up really early or staying up late. The pain needs to be shared on the team. And the last one is prioritize your overlap time. Whatever time you've got, if it's 1 hour a day, that is enough to overlap. I mean, if that's all you got, that's what you have to work with, and then you just prioritize that 1 hour that you have. So I put a link in the chat, but yeah, the time zones are tough because of just the physical nature of it.
All right. Well, thank you, Lisette. That's awesome. We are at the top of the hour. Awesome. I want everybody raise your hand for a virtual round of raised hand applauses for Lisette and taking the time to share this with us. After this, we're going to go ahead and end the webinar. Tomorrow you'll get an email with the recording. And then in that email, we'll also have a link to a post webinar survey. So when we do these things, we love to hear your feedback. We use that feedback to both make our presentations better in the future, and they can use that as part of how you then advertise yourself to the rest of the world. And because it's so valuable to us, Lisette has graciously offered for the first 3 people who respond to that survey and provide feedback, a free copy of her book. So keep your eyes out for that. That'll be coming tomorrow. And with that, I want to thank you all for being here, and we will catch you next time.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.